And we're now moving on to the panel session to end us off. So this is entitled The Impact of COVID-19 on STEM Communications and LGBT Communities. You will not get to hear my voice through this. I'll actually be handing over to Claire, who will be chairing this session. And we're hoping to be hearing from Dr. Clara Barker, Dr. Matt Young, Sarah Cosgrove, and AJ Bryant.
Hi, everyone. I think we're just waiting on one more panelist, but I'll just kind of introduce myself. Hi, I'm Claire, and I'm going to be using she, her pronouns. I'm the programming lead for the conference, so hi to all of the panelists that I've been emailing over the last few months and anyone else. I'm also the chair of OSTEM at University of Birmingham, so you might know me through that. I'm going to be chairing this panel, which Avery's already introduced, but it's the impact of COVID-19 on STEM communications and LGBTQ+ communities. So we're going to have around an hour and a bit. It's now 4, so we're going to be going until around 5:15. So I'm going to get the panelists to turn on their cameras and their microphones, and then we'll go through some introductions. Hi, Matt, since you're unmuted, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Fabulous. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for having me here today. My name's Dr. Matt Young. You can just call me Matt. I am the Public Engagement Manager at the University of Lincoln, but I also have my hand in a lot of other different pots and pies. I'm one of the trustees of the Pride in STEM Charitable Trust, and I work on a lot of science communication and engagement projects on the side, despite the fact that it is also my day job. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Cool. The next person that I can see is Sarah. So if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Cosgrove. My pronouns are she, her. I am a science communicator. I mainly work with young people in schools. I do that for the Institute of Physics. And I'm also a freelance science communicator. So I do bits of probably mainly training at the moment, but I've also done bits of presenting and other little bits.
Hi. So AJ, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Yep, I'm AJ Bryant. I use he, him pronouns. I'm currently trying to get my bachelor's in kinesiology at Penn State in the US. And I'm also the Vice President of Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility of OSTEM Inc. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, and then our final panelist, who we just couldn't find because was coming up under a different name, is Clara.
Yeah, sorry, I'd hijacked a Zoom account from the previous conference we ran. So hi everyone, I'm Dr. Clara Barker. I'm a thin film material scientist at Oxford University. I'm also the Dean for Equality and Diversity at Linacre College in Oxford. And I'm on the Equality and Diversity Committee at the Royal Society and also for the Girls' School Alliance as of this week. I think that'll do. It's enough title. Oh, and I'm the chair of the LGBT+ advisory group at Oxford University. Probably important.
Okay, so the way that this is going to work is that I have a couple of questions, but mostly we're going to be taking questions the same way that we have for everyone else's talks. So if people want to send them in on the Q&A, that should be along the bottom, and then I will read them and my moderators will poke me if I miss any. But the first question, which we think will be a really good one to introduce this, is actually, what advice do you have for anyone trying to build or support a community online during the COVID-19 pandemic? And I'll just, whoever wants to start.
Okay, everyone's being really polite. This is what happens with Zoom events. It's like, so, I mean, one thing that it's really, really difficult because we want to build events and we've actually got a lot more accessibility and being able to have these wider global groups thanks to Zoom and other internet things. But at the same time, we get tired of these events. It's hard work being in these events all the time. And so it's really, really difficult. And so hopefully other people will no doubt say, like, you know, we will have we need to form groups, and we do. And the internet and Twitter and groups like HostSTEM and other things, and even, you know, societies like the Institute of Physics and the Royal Society and things like that are trying to improve on this. And I think it's really important that when we're hosting these events and we're running them, we don't get disheartened if we don't have loads of people turn up, because the people who turn up, even if it's one person, they're the people who need you to be there. They're the people who you're there, who you're doing it for, basically. So I think it's just perseverance and putting yourself out there and letting people know where you'll be. Like I say, I run youth groups. Sometimes I have one person turn up, but that one person, they need to be there. So I think we need to take heart. It's not a failure if one person turns up. Just
I can chip in. So it's interesting what you're saying about youth groups, because I've noticed by speaking to the LGBT youth group I was working with that they've had to shift things online and the numbers have gone down. And it's really unfortunate because they're young people who probably need that support, but it's very hard for them to access it online at home. From my experience, so I'm an admin on a Discord called Aces in STEM, if anybody wants to join. Any ASPEC people, I'll put my email in the chat later so you can get in touch. And I know I mentioned it a bit earlier, but I think for me, having a flexible approach and having different options. So the nice thing about the Discord is that you can chip in any time. It can be text-based. And you could, for example, just ask a question and that may be all you need to do. But I also appreciate in situations like that, I think a bit like how I've been experiencing Twitter, is that it can feel really overwhelming. And so I think just from what Clara just said, just knowing that it's there and you can come back to it, I think is really important. We do a social, well, I say social about approximately once a month, but we also we watch a TV series together on Discord on Saturdays, called Leverage, if anybody's watched it. And that means it's a bit more low key. You don't have to have your camera on. You're just watching a TV show together. If you don't feel like chatting, it's fine, but you still have that feeling of being with other people like you as well. So that's some of the things I found have worked so far.
Yeah, so I can definitely second sort of what Sarah and Clara have already said, and I feel like it's not really giving. I'm not the best person to, I think, give advice in this situation about how to find and maintain these groups, but because my perspective from during this whole nightmare, I don't know what else to describe it as, the bizarre period of existence we've lived through and are living through, is I'm someone who actually really struggles with online socializing as well. And I just, even though, yes, it's not I don't really have much of a solution or a tip on how to find and maintain those communities, I think for the people who are trying to create those spaces and who are the doers and the organizers who make it happen, please keep doing it, because there's people like myself out there who personally, it's very difficult for us to engage with people and get the same stuff, you know, mentally from a Zoom or any kind of online based interaction when your entire work life for the last year has now shifted to be all emails and video chats. And so that can be quite challenging. But, you know, I know that over the last year or so, the few little groups and communities that I are friends, you know, like Sarah has been one of them who has done all sorts of amazing stuff on the side. When I have had the energy and I have had that, you know, I really need that bit of connection to those kind of groups, I've been able to jump in and just say hello and be there, and they've been hugely supportive. So yeah, I think second what Clara and Sarah have said, because I've been on the receiving end of needing those groups just really sporadically.
Yeah, just second what everyone has said. I think one of the biggest things is like when you have one person, like how it was mentioned, like when you have one person, you always feel like it's a failure. And I tell my volunteers at OSTEM, because we have social coordinators for our various affinity groups. And like whether it's ACE and Arrow, trans and non-binary, or race and ethnicity group, the list goes on. Like we try to hold virtual events, like whether it's a movie night, is like some sort of Zoom discussion, and there might be like 3 people, but the conversation lasted an hour and a half. And I was like, I'm not worried about numbers. I'm worried about what people get out of it. And you know how Sarah mentioned, like the Discord is nice to have, because then you can just go to it when you want to and leave it there when you don't, which is definitely really nice. Like I might pop at the weirdest hours, but I know like I can just type it, leave it there, and check it in the morning or whatever. But we have so many different channels because we're realizing that people are interested in so many different things. There are channels I'm like, I know nothing about this, but there are people that do. So we're like, we need to create the space. So I think creating the space and hopefully people will come, and knowing that the space is there has definitely helped, especially during this time.
Yeah, I do think that actually that makes a lot of sense, especially the point you made on the Discord. I've been added to so many different Discords recently, and it really has made such a big impact. So we've actually had a question come in, so I'm going to ask that one first before any others, because I feel like it's quite relevant to what we've just discussed. So I often find it much harder to speak up in online spaces. Any thoughts on how you can make online events more inviting for people who find online communication very difficult or tiring?
Yeah, I can actually chime in quickly about this. So this has been like a concern, whether you're just tired of online communication or you're anxious about it or it's an accessibility issue. Like this is something we started addressing at OSTEM. So like we make sure that there's always a chat function. And we mentioned at the very beginning, we're like, don't worry about having your camera on. Don't worry about having to speak. I'm going to have the chat function open all the time. So if you want to feel included, and then I will read the chat and then I'll answer to the chat as if I'm talking to them. And that has helped kind of bridge that like disconnect when people are like, but I don't want to speak or I don't want to have my camera on. Like I want to make people feel as comfortable as possible, but we also try to make it accessible and making sure, you know, transcripts are up there, or if people want to mention something in the chat, or give people the space if they want to unmute. That has definitely helped, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, I will, sorry, Clara, I saw your little thing on mute. So yeah, I think I agree with what AJ said. And so somebody who helps organize and facilitate events for my day job, and I've been doing a lot of this with online formats in mind. One of the biggest things I have to think about and remind the academics that I work with is accessibility. And one thing that many of us have learned over the last year is that when you are creating events and spaces and creating opportunities for conversation in an online context, there's a lot you miss out on. There's a lot of social cues and physical things that you can't read from other people and that you can't pick up on. So for instance, we just look at the panel today. It's a little bit trickier than it would be in person for us panelists to chime in, because only one person can physically speak at a time, whereas, you know, in real life you can have that little kind of overlap where you're both talking just to kind of have a conversation in a flow, and that extends to the audience as well. So the things that AJ has said is exactly the kind of stuff that I recommend to all the people that I work with. You know, having that text chat option, you know, making sure you give your audience the opportunity to be quiet and sit in the background, because for some people it is even more daunting than going up to someone at an event, you know, after they've spoken and they're standing at the side, maybe getting a drink, and you say, hey, that was really cool, I wanted to ask you this, or you wanted to, you know, just strike up a conversation. You don't have those incidental interactions that you normally have. So giving as many opportunities and in many different ways to interact is really key. And honestly, this conference is the perfect way. You've got the general chat, you've got the anonymous Q&A, and even if you're not running something like Zoom, there's so many different apps and stuff and online applications that people use nowadays, and that we use in many of our events to allow people to submit questions, send in things, play fun games, that kind of thing.
So just to add to what's been said, I agree with both Matt and AJ with everything they've said. So I run a crafting social called Cycon Crafting. If that is something that you're interested in, anyone's welcome, whether they're working in science communication, do it, or working in STEM, or just anyone really. And what we essentially do about once or twice a week is have a couple of hours where we sit on Zoom and we make stuff, we create stuff. And what I find in terms of why I think it's beneficial is that people get to show off projects, and it's nice to have that feeling of, oh, I did this really cool thing, and other people going, ooh, ah. So you've got something in which you connect to other people and also be able to show off really cool stuff that you're making. But also there are people who just don't want to talk to anyone, but want to be around people. And so I find that over a couple of hours, somebody just might quietly get on with stuff in the background while some other people are chatting. So I think that in terms of, you know, if somebody is being quiet, like one of the things I've been wary about is, well, are they having a good time? Because I prefer to chat. And actually they're having a good time, and it's just trying to make sure. So sometimes just DMing them directly and saying, hey, just want to check in, like, are you okay? Do you want me to bring you into conversation? And on top of this, I also have a code of conduct for this. And so one of the things I have put in the best practice part of the code of conduct is to try and make sure we share the conversation, but also if you notice someone was going to say something, try to bring it in, and so kind of without the host doing all the work. So yeah, that's just a couple of things to add there.
Yeah, and I'm just sort of basically agreeing. One thing that Sarah just mentioned about people turning up to these events. Yeah, I had two people in the group on Monday, and I DM'd them and was saying, hey, what you're up to? And they're like, oh, we're just drawing and listening. And it's nice to give them the option. The great thing, especially with young, you know, with LGBTI plus people, is sometimes they don't want to go to an event. Obviously, there's inequality when it comes to having technology and whether they can access it and things like that. But we can't fix everything. But what is nice is that we tend to find that we have a lot of nervous young people come to our groups. They wouldn't have the courage to come in person, but they'll come online. They don't have their cameras on. They don't speak, but they'll listen. And occasionally they'll say something in text. And I always let them know that they can say something in text. And then hopefully over a few sessions, all of a sudden they're speaking. We actually keep all the cameras off because Discord and cameras is just a pain in the bum. But yeah, so that's kind of really nice. It's like just giving people a different way to connect. And we can see it as a negative. It is difficult to do stuff online. And I don't attend many events unless I'm organizing them or I'm invited, because I struggle to spend more time online. But what I do love is that, you know, I was speaking at an event in December, and there were people in the audience who live in a country where it's illegal to be gay. So they've never heard LGBT people speaking before, you know, like apart from maybe a YouTube clip. But because it was a Royal Society of Chemistry event, they were going to a chemistry event, and they were DMing me and just saying, like, it's just amazing to be able to hear, and they wouldn't have that opportunity otherwise. So, and, you know, for people with chronic illnesses, maybe chronic fatigue, it can be exhausting going to places. So I miss that human contact. I miss seeing my friends. I do. I haven't had a big hug with Sarah for a long time, but I know that there's also real benefits of the online system. And what's been fantastic about this is that it's really improved the technology. And so I will definitely keep youth groups running online, even though the attendance might be lower. It just opens up, which is really cool. Also, just there's a lot of critter love out there, so that's really cool, just for those nerds in the audience.
That's a great way to wrap that up. Actually, really similar question to what you've just brought up is, like, do you think that the emergence of these online supports, social spaces, are going to help move the queer community spaces, like, away from bars and clubs and drinking, and, like, give somewhere else for people to interact? Kind of like what Jordan was talking about, you know, and previous speakers throughout the day.
I definitely see this as really important for my community because of just where they don't always feel included in LGBT spaces. But also just looking at kind of the history, if you go back to the early 2000s, that's when you started seeing stuff like AVEN, so that's the Asexual Visibility Education Network. And also before that, I think it was called the Haven for the Human Amoeba was the first forum. It was like a Yahoo group, I think. And that's the thing, is a lot of, when it comes to meeting other ACEs and forming communities and forming language, a lot of it has been done online. So I've definitely seen that, how it's benefited my community. But also, yeah, as you said, thinking about like going to bars, in the last survey, or one of the results I've heard from the surveys at them, so and even do an annual survey, and what they found is that ACEs tend to drink less than allo people, which I thought was really interesting. So then it kind of gets you thinking about, well, what sort of activities would they like to do that aren't necessarily tied to drinking, and can therefore online social spaces or even other spaces mean that it's, thinking, just as you said.
Yeah, I agree with Sarah that online spaces are so pivotal, especially for the LGBT movement and the formation of and the sort of advancement of the understanding of ourselves and our communities over the last 10, 20 years, if not more. I think the fact that these are all popping up right now is a really good thing. Of course, it's really great because it's reacting to a need and a problem we all face now. But I think, well, I guess I hope that these kind of online groups and communities and networks will continue even as we start to transition towards being able to do more things in person again, because I think what we've realized, not only have many of us realized that, oh my God, that could have been an email instead of a meeting, we've also realized that, no, these kind of interactions are still, it's really valuable to have them there, because unlike, like Sarah said, it is not everybody drinks or feels comfortable in a club type setting. And there's a lot of problems and issues that go with that mean those spaces can often be very exclusive to a lot of people, despite, obviously there are venues and clubs and groups that are trying to challenge and change that. But as by default, those spaces have never been as inclusive as they could be. And yes, I'd really like to see, and I think there will be a place for these groups going forward, because they're and available at the touch of a button to still have that connection to your community, to people who are your people, who are like you, and you don't need to wait to go to this one set venue that maybe you it means you miss out more. Like it's there, it's in your phone, it's in the palm of your hand.
And it's interesting for me because I don't know, age or whatever, but I've definitely stopped going to bars and clubs. I've not been doing that as much the last few years. I don't even go to as many live music events as I used to. So it's kind of nice to have other stuff, and at the same time, I'm finding it so exhausting going online as well. I don't know. Maybe I've just become a hermit in my old age. I don't know. And we've got to remember, like, a lot of people do have trouble with, it's exhausting. For me, it's exhausting. Like, I love meeting people and chatting to people, but I only have so much time that I can do that in the week. And then I'm drained and I need to stay on my own with a cup of tea. And so it's good to have options and realizing that we don't have to, go to certain things. I will say that someone in the chat has mentioned tabletop board games, and what's fantastic is the development of online board games, and that's actually what most of my socializing online is playing online board games with my friends, or online D&D with my friends. Like, for me, it's nice. We've got this excuse and we can interact, but we can also be thinking about what we're doing. To be fair, most of my in-person socializing was also board games and Dungeons and Dragons before this as well. So, it's not like it's changed, but it's great that we can do it online. And for me, that's actually what I want to go to. I want to meet up with my friends on Board Game Arena and play. So I love that. It's great. We've got more options. We've got more options than we ever used to have. It's amazing.
Unless anyone else has anything to add to that, I just wanted to bring up a question to kind of make sure that we touch on both the communities and also like STEM communication for this panel. So we have a question, what difficulties have you faced with regards to STEM communication during the COVID-19 pandemic? Which I think that the panel here has such like a range of interactions with this that it might be a good one to start with. Whoever wants to start.
I mean, I will go, so I'm good, but I'm very good at talking a lot. So if anyone else wants to jump in first, be my guest. Okay, so yes, challenges posed to the world of science communication by the pandemic. This has literally defined my last year. So as I said at the start, I'm the public engagement manager for the University of Lincoln. Very interestingly, slash annoyingly, I actually started my job around about this time last year, and little did I know I'd have about 3 weeks, 4 weeks in my office before everything got shifted online. And one of the biggest challenges has been the fact that everybody's priorities on the most part have had to change. You know, as someone who I have done and still do some of my own projects where I'm delivering and doing the sort of communication myself and the engaging, but a lot of what I do is supporting other people. And the people who do that, what they've told me is, you know, it's hard to make those kind of tasks and those kind of communication projects their main priority right now. You've got so many people looking after kids at home or looking after relatives, and also I really can't, I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir, we've all been in the same situation, but I really can't emphasize enough how much more difficult it is for us to function and do the same amount of work we do at home. And I think that's been the most challenging thing that I've come across, is this change in priorities, because I can go and do as much as I can to go and set up an online event and help people with the logistics and everything, and coach them and train them. But if they don't have the time or capacity in order to do their main day job, and on top of that somehow find time to, you know, work on turning their research into some cool talk or any other kind of project on the side of that, there's not a lot really I can do. So yeah, the biggest thing has just been trying to be very understanding and develop new ways to be accommodating for people. Because even for myself, you know, I'm someone who is neurodiverse, and working in this very weird environment has been significantly challenging for me, because it's and I know a lot of other people will relate in their own way. All the things and mechanisms we've been used to using and working with, even, you know, when it comes to communication, all those usual methods and techniques that we normally use, the venues we would normally go to do a talk, to see a particular kind of event and to engage with a certain type of content, those are all gone, those aren't there. And so there's a lot of relearning we've had to do, and also a lot of accepting of what the new limitations are on this. So yeah, it's just taking things slower these days, just accepting that we can do it and we'll get there, but it's going to be slower.
Yeah, and I think just sort of carrying on with that, it's hard. So I ran the LGBT seminar this year, and I wanted to bring people to Oxford. I wanted to see everyone, and we couldn't. We had to run online, and running an event online, you know, we obviously OSTEM are running an event here. It's a lot more work. I'm shocked at how much more time and organization it took to be able to run an event online than it did in person. And it's not actually all that much cheaper if you do it well, I'd say, and make sure you've got someone doing live transcriptions and you're paying your speakers. It's not much cheaper. So there's a lot of that. And I'm also going to just give a shout out, because I see a lot of frustration with students and researchers and stuff in university who aren't getting in the lab as much, and they aren't getting that one-to-one FaceTime teaching and stuff like that. But I will also say that, like, all the staff are working harder than I've ever seen them. This has been the busiest year I've ever had in the lab. I've got less research students, and I am just drained at the minute. It's just so much more hard work. So maybe keep on, you know, sort of having a go at your institutions for money back or whatever, but also remember your students and everything, your staff are shattered, like we are. I mean, I haven't really not been in the lab. I've just come from the lab, which is why my hair's wet, because I got wet on the way home. And I've not really stopped, but it has stopped me being able. I love having school groups come around my lab, and I've not had any in 15 months, you know, because we've not been able to do that. I miss being able to bring the undergrads into my lab and show them around and show them how we do work. And we've not been able to do that, and that's really sad. it's just a shame, but it will, you know, that will resume. But what has been great is seeing people adapt in some ways. And even with science communications, like I really learned how to use YouTube properly during lockdown. I started doing, you know, little engagement science videos explaining what I do with animations, which I didn't have the time before to do. And then I was in, you know, locked up for a month or so, and I was able to do that. And I've had a whole bunch of hits from people that would never have heard me talk about my science, sort of hitting me up. So that's really nice. That sort of it takes it a little bit more global, and we're adapting on how we communicate, how we talk about science, and that's wonderful. Like, and hopefully, what I'm really hoping is that this is gonna be a wake-up call for all our lecturers, that they can teach in better and more interesting and more engaging ways. I think our lecturers are starting to learn that, you know, you can record things and it's like, oh, you can do this, or you can do this. And hopefully there's an output of just, you know, ingenuity in people like me and people like everyone here that are talking about science in a different way and using it. And I think that might be eye-opening for some of our, well, we've had these printouts for 20 years, so we'll keep on doing them. Hopefully it'll change teaching. So maybe there's positive from that. Maybe.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to just jump in again quickly on the back of what Clara said, because Clara, you reminded me of another key obstacle to sort of in communicating and engaging people with science and STEM related topics right now. And it's that for those of us who might not, you know, if you're not like me and this is something maybe I have to deal with every single day, you might not necessarily realize that actually we can't take the formats and the approaches that we used to and directly translate them. That just doesn't work. Just think about yourselves and how you might have all interacted with online meetings or events and talks. It is so much more difficult to pay attention to a talk when it's just in your screen, when it's like, you know, maybe about something a bit more academic and something you have to apply yourself to, because it's not a movie. And with if you think about what your experiences of watching a movie, there's all sorts of sounds and flashes, and the screen changes all the time. If a movie was just a single frame the whole way through, it might win some weird arty awards for being weird and quirky, and Willem Dafoe will probably star in it. But it's not engaging. It's so hard to maintain that, and we really need to just remember that. So there's a lot of new approaches and stuff we need to learn, and stuff we need to accept that we need to change. We just can't do it the same way. We've got to really shake things up, and I think that is one of the other than the issue of priority that I talked about before. Changing how you do things, it's absolutely necessary. You can't just be like, oh, I'll give the same lectures, or I'll give the same talk, and I'll develop the same activity, and I'll just do it online, because you just can't do that. It might work for you, but for your audience, it just doesn't work. And you also run the danger of disengaging them and putting them off, because people think, oh my goodness, this is like 10 times more boring than I was expecting. So yeah, and then I'll shut up.
Is it okay if I chime in too as well? So something that, you know, we brought up, you know, priorities and engagement and stuff. One of the main things that I've noticed is when you go on campus and you go in a lab and you're at class, like in a room with everybody, you have access to the same things at that time. Your home life is kind of in the back. I'm not saying it doesn't get brought in, but it's kind of like, okay, I'm in chemistry lab, like I have the things in front of me, I have my manual, I have my stuff. But when you get out of there and you go back to your home, your life, whatever that looks like, you realize how different things are. So I'm realizing that, you know, some students are like on their couch on a phone because they don't have really access to like a computer or have access to what other students would have. And then other people might have like a whole desktop with an HD camera set up and like a bunch of things to take notes on, and might have their own office space. And then you're realizing like what students can succeed in that environment and what students can't, because when you're in a lab and you have your, I guess, higher economic class or status students and then lower social status students, being in a chem room, like I said, you have all those resources and you have your teachers there and your instructors. But as soon as you go home, or whatever that home environment looks like, that is immediately taken away. And that can be like the make or break of the student and how they succeed in there, or ultimately have to like take leaves of absences. People have plenty of people have had to do that with it being virtual, or honestly just not being able to take the course because they couldn't go on campus, or, you know, have money to take the course. Like some people are just going straight part-time now. So I definitely want to just acknowledge that that has happened as well.
Just like on that point, before anyone else chimes in, I just wanted to point out that like even here with speakers that are used to doing speaking events, we have such a range of setups, like people using headphones or speakers or like wherever we are. And then this is such a small demographic that I can really see how like on a larger scale you would have an even more diverse range of what people can access. So does anyone else have anything to chime in? So
I really wanted to add to what AJ just said. So this is something we also find with school age students as well. So that can really vary. So maybe they might have a phone, they might have a tablet, they might have a laptop. It depends how many devices per household. But really a lot is also about Wi-Fi connection, so access. So I've generally found over the last year in doing schools engagement has been hard. And for me personally, that means that my goalposts have completely moved. So I actually don't know how well I'm doing in terms of doing my job or any kind of engagement. But yeah, engaging schools has been hard because, so in the UK, they were online from March until the summer. And then last term or semester was September to December, where they were in person and now they're online. And that's a lot of shifting around for teachers. And also I know, like, speaking to teachers, the mental health of the young people is not great. And especially those who are expecting to take exams at certain points, it's all up in the air at the moment and huge amounts of uncertainty. So therefore, you feel like you want to support these schools and you don't want to feel like you're forcing your engagement on them to meet, let's say, your objectives. But you've got to do what's best for them. But the problem with that is sometimes you don't know what is actually best for them. And the thing that they really need is something you can't offer, whether that's more staff time, more resources for the schools just to do their own things. For kind of on to side of that, for me as a freelancer and how I found my last year of science communication, I've lost work. To put it bluntly, it's really impacted lots of freelancers. I've also seen freelancers really change the way they do things, get more equipment. And we also had the whole thing of, well, if we're hired to still do a talk, are we going to be paid less for it because we're doing this from home? So there were lots of things that freelancers had to think about. On the more positive side for me as a freelancer, I've gotten to work with science communicators who don't live anywhere near me because of the online aspect. I did a talk for a Spanish university, so I did work for abroad for the first time. I've run training with science communicators, but also running training for anyone in the world, really. As long as it suited their time zone, they could attend my session. And that's something I've never had the opportunity to do before as a science communicator. So yeah, this last year's been rubbish in a lot of ways in terms of impacting my job, but it's also opened up these wonderful opportunities that I don't think I would have had otherwise, and been really fortunate to have.
We're just about halfway through, so I'm going to take some of the questions from the Q&A box. As always, we've kind of touched on some of these already, so we'll just see what we can add to them. But the top most voted one is, since COVID has moved many things online, I found myself in a lot of queer accepting online spaces. How do you think the shift will go when we all go back to in-person classes, meetings, and work?
I don't know. That is a very different thing. So part of what so that was kind of like the first half of my experience with last year is, right, how do we prepare for when we're going back? Because for those of you in the UK will know, as far as what we were told, it was everything's fine, go eat out, help out, that kind of thing. And so, you know, the people in charge followed suit and we were told, you know, start preparing for how things might go back to normal. And that was a very interesting exercise to start thinking about blended environments and how that might work, because if I'm very honest, I don't think there is going to be a back to normal as in pre-pandemic anytime soon, but it may be a slow approach. And I think what will be very interesting, because we've seen how useful the online tools we've all developed and started using are, I think there's going to be another learning curve of figuring out how we integrate these tools, such as Zoom, or maybe even more to do with live streaming, integrate that with a proportion of face-to-face contact. So for instance, we might what I was planning for, and what I'm now looking at doing again for maybe at the end of this year, are situations, events, activities, talks, that kind of thing, where we have a certain number of people who attend face-to-face, but there is still a digital element involved that allows people remotely to engage, not just view, because obviously we've had live streaming of events for a long time now, but actually using these tools, I guess, such as GatherTown, Zoom, live Q&As, to be able to bring people who aren't there into the room virtually. So I think that's what we're going to see. I don't imagine, and as it looks like the other panelists might agree with me, I don't imagine we're just going to be dropping these tools, because, like I said, especially if you work in a more corporate environment, or if you work on sort of even in academia, actually, there's definitely situations where you've realized, oh, we can use this. We don't have to go travel across the country for that one meeting, kind of thing, unless it's a cool conference, which is going to be great to all be there in person. If there's, some of us collaborating and there's 5 of us and one of us is the only person who doesn't live in town, maybe they can just join in remotely and they don't have to, I don't know, fly from wherever. So yeah, that's what I think might happen.
So like to clarify, just kind of creating a mixed environment of maybe in-person and online spaces as well would be great.
Yeah, definitely. I think, especially because we're if we're being realistic, we're not suddenly going to, even if you're thinking country to country rather than globally, which it's difficult to do because STEM and related fields, we are international. We're constantly working beyond borders. All countries are at various different stages. We're not going, the UK specifically, we're not going to be New Zealand or Australia anytime soon and just be able to be like, okay, that's fine. Everyone can go back to the offices and be there face to face. It's going to take a long time to roll out the vaccine and to make sure everything's fully safe. So certain groups of people are still going to have to shield and protect themselves. There's still going to be restrictions on social distancing and the extent of social mixing. And so the only way to deal with that is to start to blend those two things, give people, bring back in the face-to-face interaction where we can and where it's useful and effective, and but then keep the digital element. And people are already looking at this, and we're kind of, people like me anyway, and we're kind of ready to go. We're like, okay, we're braced for the next next jump, the next learning curve.
Yeah, I actually just wanted to bring AJ into this kind of on an OSTEM perspective, that I think the Discord, I can't imagine that wouldn't carry on being an existing space for people, especially the queer OSTEM community. I don't know if you had an opinion on kind of that aspect.
Yeah, our goal, we had like a Slack beforehand, while things were still in person, and absolutely nobody used it. And we realized we needed Discord to make more of like an informal space. Our goal is to have that year round, if we go in person or not. We actually create temporary channels. I also have rats. That's gonna crinkle. That's another thing about being on Zoom. Pets will come. Everyone just loves my cat, apparently. But back to the Discord, it's something that we wanted to do year round, and we have temporary channels that pop up. So in the US, it's Black History Month, so we did a temporary channel for that. We have a temporary channel for a conference. So sometimes in person, I think we mentioned in previous questions, we are scared and nervous to walk up to people and ask them questions. So sometimes you're like, let me just throw the question in the channel and someone will answer for me. So I think our hope is to keep it and not try to like transition out of it completely, and still have a space, because even if we do going in person in the future, we are still across the 50 states. So I think that was something that starting to mention is like travel and trying to get people all together in different time zones too. Like, I don't even know, it's like 11:45 a.m. for me. And like, I'm able to, be here with you without having to drop a dime and hop on flights and do all of that. So I think that's mainly our goal. I also tend to ramble, so I apologize if I didn't even answer the question.
I will say, I think, so I already said earlier, I know the importance of keeping my youth groups running online as well as in-person events. Blending them is a little bit more difficult because we all know that certain people are able to dominate discussions. And I do wonder what would happen if there's some people online and some people in the room where the meeting's being hosted, and whether those online might be spoken over, or put on mute. And you think that saying that someone will be put on mute is quite extreme, and yet, I don't know. We all know that STEM is improving, but we still have our issues with certain people that might be the sort of people that call meetings. So I think we just need to be careful about how we go about it, because I really do want that accessibility of blended, because like say for people with certain disabilities or maybe chronic illnesses, it's amazing. And for that, for me not traveling, I've talked in 3 different cities in the last 3 nights, and it's fantastic that I've not been on the train. As much as I miss everyone, it's been kind of nice that I haven't been on the train all that time. So especially I did miss out when I did a talk abroad and I didn't get to fly abroad. They're the ones that you're like, oh damn. But it's kind of interesting. So we just need to think about how we do it and make sure that there is going to be social inequality in terms of technology and internet and things like that, and it's going to be different in different countries. And also accessibility needs, we do need to think about that. I said before, I'm doing a lot of animations, but I'm making sure that I'm vocally explaining those as well. We need to, if we do use this and integrate it, we make sure we do so in an equitable way. And I think that there's going to be that thought about just doing it, and that people don't think about how they do it. So we just need to be aware, and we need to speak up and make sure that we are doing equitably.
I always find that a tricky word to say, isn't it? Even though I must use it all the time. I guess just to add to what you're saying, Clara, I know somebody who does girl guiding. I don't know what would be the equivalent in the US. Like, would it be Scouts in the US? But I think there might be anyway. I know that one of the things that she was exploring with her group was the idea of having an online group permanently, because it's something that she sort of looked into. Oh, there we go. I got it. It's one of the badges. I know she said, was it in the 2000s, they actually had an online forum that I think they did get regular attendees, but wasn't. I think it's one of those things that they just didn't see the value in it. So I'm hoping that because of our current situation, that they're able to have something a bit more permanently. So it's sort of blended. It's kind of about having that option there, isn't there? I know for conferences, that is something that has been discussed in terms of making sure we consider a blended approach going forward. And I know it's something that I've spoken to science communicators about in terms of what that could look like. Is it, well, if we have an event where one day it's going to be online like this and in person like this, I think there's a lot of possibilities. And in terms of me with sort of continuing the Discord with Ace Folk, I really would like to continue it, because we are all over the place. As like AJ was saying, you're everywhere. So I would love to continue things online. And to be honest, I've had the best social life I've had in a few years in the last year. And that sounds like it sounds odd to say something like that, but because of where I live, I'm not actually necessarily living in the same place as a lot of people that I personally know. So for me, I would also like to continue any kind of socializing or any networking online.
Yeah, I think from like a OSTEM University of Birmingham kind of chapter perspective, that's really similar. And something that I've been considering is maybe when we do our in-person events, they can stay in person, but it's the time outside of those internal events, you know, like when people are just randomly messaging about, well, AG's cat, for instance, just on the Discord. I think those moments, keeping up with the Discord in those spaces are really important. Actually, the next question that we have is kind of a tangent away, but I think it's kind of important. So I work in the IT industry, and as an EDI committee member at my employer, I'm keen to hear how you think employers can continue the support gained from groups when people transition from academia into industry. So if anyone has any opinions on kind of like that tradition.
So I know that a lot of tech companies, I'm not saying all, you know, obviously I'm not doing that, but there are quite a lot of big tech companies that do have sort of their pride committees, their various EDI committees. And in some ways they're able to achieve a lot more than we are in sort of academia, because universities go through an awful lot of red tape, and it can be quite difficult. And we have, you know, government education ministers coming up with ludicrous ideas about what merits free speech. And so companies can actually be a lot more agile. Now, of course, that's going to depend on the company. It's going to depend on the size of the company. But I am seeing, so there's a lot of companies that I know that are part of groups, networks of networks. So I work, you know, I talk to a lot of companies that have their own pride networks or any other thing. But then I also see that we're starting to have more sort of pride in tech and pride in IT and things like that. So there's more, again, more global things. And I think especially employers, so for the companies that maybe don't have the size to have their own companies, we need to be making sure that they give those people time to go to our conferences, our events. So like the, you know, OSTEM events, like the LGBT Steminar, whether it's, you know, an event for being sort of Black in STEM, something like that. We need to be making sure that employers understand the relevance and why it is important and why it's good for staff to actually be able to attend these events rather than always plugging away at numbers or whatever else it is. So yeah, hopefully employers are learning that community is a lot more important in this current climate, but I work in academia, so I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of recognize that like the panel at the moment is maybe not so suited for answering the question, but it feels like an important one. Maybe if we look at more specifically, like I think the concept is groups in academia are obviously quite well established of versus maybe in a tech company or just any company, you might not necessarily have that, or it might not be the first thing on their mind. It's kind of something similar to what Julia was talking about earlier. Matt, if you wanted to chime in.
Yeah, it was kind of actually just what, based on what you said, Claire. My experience, so I've not really worked in the commercial private sectors for a while, but I have a lot of friends and colleagues who do. And my experience and understanding of them is that unlike in a university academia type world, there are other, you know, money is very much the bottom line, and that is the driving factor. And so Rich, based on your question, you know, it's really good to see that there already is an EDI committee. Obviously, how well that works and what they do is another question. But you can, you know, use those things to your advantage. You know, it shows that there is a recognition that there's a need for these things. And what from my experience and what I've seen, when employees like yourself who say, okay, this is important to me, but this isn't actually being addressed effectively, or there's other issues and maybe more momentum needed, pointing this out and saying, you know, using the evidence that the company gives you is really important to say, you know, you're saying you're supporting EDI, you've set up this committee, but, you know, we're not seeing the people like us who need to benefit from these actions, we're not seeing that. So, you know, there's ways you can pressure your company, and, you know, like Clara said, it really does depend on the size of the company and the type of the company, the type of resources they have. But because places beyond university-based academia are going to be more commercially minded and economically minded, if there's a way you can say, look, this is really good for us because it's, you know, we're going to be more productive if we're able to work better. Simple things like that. It's frustrating, and I know the suggestions I'm giving now are kind of work for you to do in this kind of environment, but practically just based on the things I know and the people I've spoken to, this is what they tell me. Like, you sometimes have to do and very often I know this is put on LGBT people or anyone who's from a marginalized community in these situations. You kind of have to sometimes give your employers a kick up the butt to say, because very often the people at the top are not people like us, and you have to say, hey, wake up, time to do something.
What I would just say is that there's a reason why. So I realize this is very UK based, but the Stonewall Workplace Index, you find that there's a lot more sort of banking and finance companies at the top than, say, universities. The banking, there have been various reports that show that, you know, if they're looking at binary genders and if they're looking at race, then actually their profits are increasing. They're actually being more productive as companies. And tech companies are starting to take note of that. So big tech companies are also sort of paying more attention. Now, obviously, we hear about things like, and I don't know how true this is, but, you know, you hear about Google, they've got these great big pride things, and then they go and do stuff and everyone's walking out and protesting because it's not actually as good as they're saying. That's being held to account. But yeah, the banking world has sort of seen that actually diversity is good. So it's in their interest. So they're working on it from a, you know, to raise profits. And I think the tech world is kind of following in that. And so there's been a number of events that I've talked at in the last few years, which have been big tech companies looking at LGBT in tech. So there's a definite shift. There's a definite shift towards that. It's that whole hanging the carrot out in front of them. As much as sometimes you want to set them on fire, I do tend to send those papers to a lot of people.
I'm actually going to move on to the next question now, because I think it's kind of very apt for this specific event. So with online events, I've seen there's often an expectation that everything will be recorded and available after the fact, which obviously is something that we've asked. Well, I specifically have been constantly asking all of the people here today, are you recording? Recording, no. And do we think that that's a good thing? And how can we address concerns around safe spaces versus concerns about accessibility in these cases?
Yeah, that is a really good question. I know it kind of depends on the space. I know that, like, if it's a class, like if it's like a lecture, I'm like, yeah, record that, put that, whatever, right? But I know at least for OSTEM and our virtual events, I personally don't record anything, but I know that it's a question of like, how do we make sure that everyone's included in the space? So I try to do a quote unquote smaller version or a brief version of what we did or what we discussed and put that in the Discord channel so people know. So if I'm like, oh, you know, we watched this movie, do you want to possibly watch on your own time? We can discuss later. You know, here's the movie that we watched, or here's one of the main concepts that we talked about. And so that everyone feels included, but we don't have to like have everybody and record it and it thrown into a space and get shared out, because we want to make sure that everyone's comfortable. I know that doesn't tackle every single thing when it comes to accessibility, but that is one thing that we found that kind of helps a little bit as far as navigating all of that. Sorry, Sarah, I saw you on mute at the same time as me.
Yeah, I pretty much going to echo what you just said. I can give an example because I think it really depends on why you want to record and what is actually the benefits or not recording. So yeah, we did a Q&A session at work because it's LGBT History Month. Myself and another colleague sort of ran a session where they talked about experiences, answered questions, but we were wary that if we recorded it, then it would mean that some people may not be so forthcoming with their experiences, but also their questions, and also for us to feel comfortable. I think for that, I didn't necessarily feel comfortable for it to be recorded and shared. And one of the things that we said as a follow-up is that we would provide a summary of the session, as well as we collected questions which were asked anonymously, and that would be at least shared afterwards, and that it was still an open door to have more discussions. It's not like it'll stop there. So I don't think it's the end of the world to not record things like that. In terms of when I have seen stuff recorded like conferences, so you'll have it as maybe something like somebody who's watching this later on, but I've also seen conferences that will have recorded videos that people can spend, can have the week to watch. And then I know that for LGBT STEM Day, I think it was Pride in STEM who hosts an event where, so you can watch videos beforehand, but also have the opportunity to actually do a Q&A with the people who spoke in the video. So you kind of got a bit of a mixed approach there, where you still have a live session, which is not being recorded, but also still be able to get the benefit from the content as well. So I think that's a nice way of actually balancing the two.
And just a final point on that, when it comes to recording, I think it's very important to remember that the, very much agree with what's been said about, thinking about, do you need to record this? Why are you recording it? Is it appropriate? Because just because the button's there doesn't mean we should use it. But it's important to remember that the onus is very much on the people organizing. You have the logistical perspective, where you must realize that here in the UK, we've got GDPR rules that we need to abide by, but also just in terms of common decency, and it also overlaps into the issue of safe spaces and accessibility. If you are deciding that this is an appropriate thing to record this event, this session, you need to make it explicitly clear to people that you can get their explicit consent. One of the ways we've got around this in some of the events I've had to work on, where we've had researchers talking to members of the public, is they've wanted, the researchers have maybe wanted to have that recording for their own purposes, but the onus is then on them to say, because they want the session recorded, the onus is on them to make sure it is properly edited, so that it's only them, the agreed speakers, who have agreed to give their prepared talk. So and the audience know that. So just the set, you'll see it's recording, and this event is being recorded, but just so you know, and this goes out in the emails and everything, none of your contributions when it comes to the Q&A, when it comes to discussions, none of that's going to be in there. So it's things like that. It will require often to be able to record these kind of sessions and use them for something, and use them well. You're going to have to put in work to edit them, to make sure it goes out in a format that is appropriate, and that is addressing those safe space the issues, and those issues of security as well.
Did anyone else have anything to add to that? No? Okay, the next question is, are you concerned about accessibility of mixed online/in-person spaces? I find the interpersonal dynamics in those situations even harder than pure online. So we've kind of already touched on this, but I think this is more specifically like commenting on the hybrid approach and kind of accessibility of those.
It's really difficult. We've still got so many power dynamics at play in academia, in the industry as well. We're still fighting for that equality, right? We're still fighting for that equal platform. It's not there. So yeah, online is going to be as difficult as it is. The power dynamics are always going to be there, but hopefully we will be able to sort of pull them down and hold them to account. It's really difficult. It's really difficult, and I don't know. It's interesting because it's sort of I see something in the chat, and it was something that I was thinking of, that at least if you're recording, it's all very easy to have those one-on-one events with, say, a student and a lecturer, and they are in a room and then something happens and there's no evidence of it. And so it's interesting that if you're doing it online and you're having those meetings online, then potentially you can record them. But then again, how do you do that? What do you do it for? What's the, and so it's really, really difficult to know exactly. I like the idea that you can record this. I know that I'm speaking at an event next Friday, and it's been distributed through gender critical channels that they should turn up. So there is that sort of like, it would be good to record it, but we've got to be careful that we don't record it. So I don't know, I'm just rambling. Maybe someone's got some coherent thoughts.
Personally, so as someone who's had to think about this kind of thing a lot, I guess I take more of an optimistic view. I don't think there's anything going to be particularly new in terms of accessibility concerns when it comes to these mixed online and in-person spaces and events. But it will just, I think that the biggest thing will be people doing the learning and stuff that we're still trying to do now. So for instance, making sure that things are password protected where they need to be if you've got people under the age of consent in your country, that people have the information that they need beforehand. You've got lots of live transcribing services that work really well for online events, but also now for in-person events. I mean, PowerPoint, as just like a basic thing, PowerPoint can live transcribe you. I mean, it's not amazing the amount of times I've used it and it said I've been talking about EastEnders, which I have never watched in my life. It's been great fun, but there are a lot more tools available to people, and I think it's really great that we're getting questions about accessibility, about situations which we're not really even in yet, when there's so many other environments that where accessibility is still not even thought about in its entirety. So I think it's really good that we're thinking about that now. And yeah, I think the tools are there, the approaches are there. We learned a lot of the approaches for the digital realm in the last year, and we just need to continue to apply them really. And I think, yeah, when it comes to accessibility and representation and issues of and other EDI issues in events like this, it's just a constant work in progress, and yeah, just need to keep at it.
I wanted to add actually that on the issue of kind of a hybrid approach, I think that specifically in universities, something that we try and do is obviously have in-person, but then have an accessible way of seeing it for those people that aren't around. But I know that some places just don't do that. I wondered if you had an opinion on, like, is it possible to go back to a situation where people would claim, well, we can't record this session, when people are, like looking for accessibility for people that can't make it to in-person things, just specifically from a university point of view, because that's something I can relate to.
I'm just gonna say really quickly that COVID has been fantastic for accessibility in terms of blowing the doors wide open and showing that all those people that said that we couldn't record these lectures, all those people that said we can't have live transcription, all those people that said they couldn't do it, they've been proven to be wrong. It just takes effort to do it. It's harder. Maybe it costs a little bit of money, but it is possible, and they can't get away with that excuse anymore. So that is awesome. Like, no one can say that they can't do it anymore. It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
We actually have a final ending question from Avery. So we have about 5-6 minutes left. I specifically, I guess, wanted to ask, like, is it possible in reality to ensure, as people organizing events or attending events, that others are actually also following the same things as us? So if it's not meant to be recorded, are people not recording or not taking photos and so on?
I want to just quickly, I'll leave someone else to answer that first, but someone said that live transcription isn't the most reliable in the chat. And they're absolutely right. With the LGBT seminar, we had a live person doing the transcription. We weren't relying on AI, because AI is better than nothing, but a live person doing it is better than that. And actually, I was talking to some disability activists recently, and I was asking what's better, because they're both language independent, is live transcription in English or BSL interpretation best. And they said that, to be honest, some people BSL is their first language, so we should actually have both. So yes, auto closed caption transcription is getting better, but try and pay for someone to actually do it. It's a lot better. And there are some good groups doing it now. We might need a reminder of the question.
Yes, I was just about to ask.
Okay, so the question is basically when we're, hosting and creating these events in these spaces where we're not recording, is it possible that we can control, like, are people recording it and sharing it elsewhere? And also, like, does that mean that it's better to actually record it ourselves and so that we can control where it's going?
Yeah, I'll come in very briefly on that just because it's similar to what I was talking about in the last question. But yeah, I think, again, this is something where the onus does come back onto those who are organizing it. It's up to us as the people who make these events happen and who set up these spaces and run them and have responsibility for them. I will say, you have to, it's good to start thinking about barriers and these challenges you might encounter before you even start organizing them, because this is the digital age. Like, yes, there is a possibility that people can record these things without, like, we could, I could be screen recording my whole screen right now, record this entire session, and no one will know because it's not linked with the Zoom software. No one would do that. Not that I am doing that, because I actually don't even know how to. I just know that it's possible. But what I'm saying is, it's good to start thinking. It's good to think about these potential eventualities as organizers, and then take it upon yourself to say, right, if there is this demand for recording, but we as the organizers realize there's a risk from that. If people just take their own recordings, that's when you need to step up and say, okay, yeah, just as I think is what you said, Claire, it's much better if you have control over that content that's going out, especially if there is sensitive subject matter. For instance, working with, if we get on the topic of STEM communication and engagement with STEM subjects, a lot of the time the researchers will be very particular about how their words and the contents of their research and subject matter is described and put across, because that can greatly affect how it's perceived. You as the person who's putting that out there needs to have control over it, and as much as possible, so that you can meet your responsibilities.
It's an interesting thought on what you said about sort of recording it, so at least you've got it, because I'm trans, and so there are plenty of people that have come to live events and been tweeting what I've said completely out of context. And so there is something to be said for sort of having a recording and being able to, like you say, there's ways around screen capturing and things like that, and I've not thought about it, but maybe there is something to be said about recording for our own safety, to make sure that we have a backup, so that if something comes out in 3 months' time, no one's edited it. We've seen this happen to politicians, and no one's really beyond reproach. There are certain groups that are willing to do this, and they've got enough time on their hands that they've got a lot of time to learn it at the moment, because they've not got anything else to do, apparently. So no, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think on that point as well, you have to make a distinguishing factor between, like, as the organizers, we're the ones recording it, versus you as speakers attending it. Like, do you trust the people that are organizing it to be recording it for safety purposes versus just, yeah. I mean, I would hope, like, whoever you're attending, you know them, you like them, but.
Well, like I say, you send out a link, and people have, the LGB Alliance have been sharing the link for the event I'm going to talk at next Friday. They're going to have the link. They're going to have the password.
Yeah.
They can come to the event. It's difficult.
Does anyone...
It's still good.
Does anyone have anything else to add on that question? It's quite a difficult one. I think it was put out there specifically for that reason, as a nice ending, you know, end on a high note. If not, then I guess that brings us quite nicely exactly on time, as most of the things I do are, to the end of this panel. I wanted to thank all of you, actually. I know that it's been quite hectic over the last few weeks and months and can't really see you in person or anything, just emailing and hoping for responses. So thank you very much for actually replying to me and kind of, you know, getting involved and coming to this panel now. Avery, I guess handing back over to you.